Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast, being recorded at night, which is one of the reasons that I look as though I have just emerged from Dracula's tomb. That's not really because of night, it's because of the room that I'm in my house. Doing this on Thursday night because we were unable, for scheduling reasons, to do it as we ordinarily do it in the morning. So this podcast for Friday, April 17th, 2026, is being recorded on Thursday night, April 16th, 2026. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And joining us today, our contributing editor Puba at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's host of his own thrice weekly news briefing at 8:30 in the morning, available to you at FDD or on Twitter, all over the place, Jonathan Schanzer. Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Jonathan Schanzer has a piece in the current issue of Commentary, now available at commentary.org. This is our May issue. I'm very proud of it. And Jonathan has a piece that asks the question, how do you win a war when your opponent will not surrender? And we're going to discuss that a little later, but it is a very important and interesting piece that obviously reflects the reality on the ground, which is the United States is, and will likely secure what is an astounding military victory over the regime in Iran, that the regime in Iran simply will not acknowledge as a profound victory over it. And what does that mean, really? Does it matter whether they do? Does it matter whether they say we lost? Will we know that we won if they refuse to say that they lost? And I think actually the events of this week and a lot of things that have happened this week are increasingly making it clear that we are on the path to victory without question, but not a victory that is going to be universally acknowledged as such. We have on the side, which is what we should get to first, seemingly on the side and seemingly having been an adventure that the Iranians were engaged in to try to distract the world's attention from its terrible military position, which is, oh my God, Israel's hitting Lebanon. That's not fair. There's not going to be any kind of peace until Israel's stopped doing what it's doing in Lebanon, which it is attempting to secure a peaceful situation on its northern border so that the northern part of Israel can be free from constant barrages by the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. And the bluff of the Iranians and the bluff of Hezbollah in some ways and all sorts of things seem to have been called today. Now, maybe it's our bluff. Maybe I'm deluding myself that Iran and the axis of evil have been outflanked. But Jonathan Schanzer, to start with you, since this is really your wheelhouse. This is as wheelhouse for a person as anything can get. Jonathan has written books about Hezbollah and Israel and the conflict between the war between the wars, which
You'll never get more wheelhouse.
You'll never get more wheelhouse is what I'm saying. So Jonathan Schanzer, 5 o'clock today, Donald Trump announced, before the Israelis or the Lebanese announced, Donald Trump announced that there would be a 10-day ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, and he would be brokering some kind of a meeting between the Lebanese Prime Minister Aoun, is that how you pronounce it? Yep. Aoun or Aoun?
Aoun.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu in Washington at the White House. So this ceasefire, which made some of my very hawkish friends in Israel nervous, the terms of the ceasefire as announced in the deal signed by both sides are the language is pretty astonishing. Would you agree?
Look, I would, but let me get one thing out of the way first. It is odd to have the leader of a third country declare a ceasefire on behalf of two sovereign states that are at war. In other words, Donald Trump just swooped in and was like, nope, you're not fighting anymore. And and I got to say, when you talk about your friends in Israel, your right-wing friends that are unhappy about this, there are a lot of them. Because what Israel's just done over the last month is, they responded to the first 5 rockets that were fired, and then they started to mobilize, and then they mobilized some more, and then they called up tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers, and then they brought the fuel and the weapons and the other ordnance and the platforms and the defenses and everything. And it's this massive, logistical, expensive, difficult thing to do.
We're talking here about a move to the northern front in Israel that is apart from what is going on between Israel and Iran. All of this logistics that they have decided essentially to try to solve or do some version of solving the problem on their northern border from Hezbollah, which has been ongoing on and off for 43 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Sometimes I need context.
No, we just need to sort of there was a missing it that could have been Iran or it could have been Lebanon. So anyway.
you should be an editor. Anyway, so they mobilize, right? And they're doing it while there is a massive war going on with Iran. And like Bibi and the IDF, they've gotten the IDF to do something that, is extremely difficult to do, and it's expensive, and it's taking a toll on the people. And the people are like groaning about it, but they agree that it's necessary. And then they start taking their shots at Hezbollah. And the other day we saw that they took out like 350 Hezbollah guys in a matter of minutes. They've been doing unbelievable things with hunting and chasing down the weapons and the fighters, and they're eviscerating Hezbollah. And this is designed to be the war that ends the wars. And we knew that there were people in Lebanon that were, they didn't want the war. They wanted this thing to stop. But it's amazing when you talk to Lebanese, as I do on occasion, they're cheering for the Israelis. I mean, they're saying, good, get rid of this Iran-backed terror group once and for all. We want them gone. And Israel, you're our best chance, right? And so I'm hearing all of this and I'm watching all this and I'm thinking, great, there's full alignment. And I got to tell you, it's not just rank and file Lebanese that are saying this. I will just tell you, without getting into names and specifics, some pretty senior people that I've been talking to from the government of Lebanon have been pretty happy about everything that's gone on over the last month. And what Donald Trump has possibly done here, and I want to say possibly because I think we need to dissect this, he may have just snatched victory from the Israelis. He may have just pulled them back right at the moment where they were able to dominate the battlefield, destroy this terrorist organization once and for all, and maybe set things right. Now, the other way of looking at this is that it was the threat and use of military force that got the Lebanese government to agree to this, direct talks that they had between the Lebanese ambassador and the Israeli ambassador on Monday in Washington, and that this was ultimately what we were all looking for. Here's the problem, okay? Let's say that we are on track for a deal, as Donald Trump has, I think, laid out, and this idea that Aoun is coming to Washington and that there's going to be a White House meeting with Bibi, and all the political alignment is happening, and it's all great. Here's the problem. If Hezbollah is still in Lebanon, and Hezbollah doesn't want to be disarmed, and Hezbollah has the military power that is essentially equivalent to that of a mid-sized European country like the Czech Republic, and that's the assessment that we get, who's going to dismantle Hezbollah? How is this thing going to happen if there's a political deal without the military? And that's what your friends in Israel are asking about right now.
But now, you have now, of course, brought the morosity to this once cheerful podcast. Started out happy. You went right for the gut, punching me in the gut. But I want to point out, Seth, I think, has a slightly different perspective, because in the post that Seth put up earlier this evening, Seth Mandel, our very own Seth Mandel, points out that it is not the right in Israel that is having a cow. It is the very, very, very malleable anti-Bibi opposition that is, say, ideologically kind of all over the map, that is now saying, oh, Trump is telling us what to do. Bibi is now just Trump's lapdog after weeks of the American right attempting to make the case that America is Bibi's lapdog and that we're only doing what the Israelis want us to do. And so Seth dug up many funny quotes from Yair Lapid and other leaders of the Israeli opposition, like swinging back and forth over the last year and a half to find something to say about how Bibi is either ruining our relationship with Trump or if it is destroying our ability to fight or whatever. Whatever it is, Bibi is doing it wrong. Here's where I want to just disagree with you and then have Seth talk. The question here is whether the agreement that was signed actually is a ceasefire in any recognizable sense. Because as Seth details, the Israelis seem to have reserved to them in this agreement the right to do just about anything if a bullet happens to fly at an Israeli soldier or if a rocket happens to be fired across the border from Lebanon into Israel. And that persists beyond the terms of this 10-day ceasefire.
Yes. And before Seth takes his shots at me, and bring it, Seth, I'm ready. But you're right, and it's good. In that sense, it's good. It is not dissimilar from the previous ceasefire agreement that lasted for more than a year between Israel and Lebanon. Israel had the same right, and it did use that right almost every day against persistent Hezbollah violations, but it still didn't get us where we wanted to go. We actually have similar clauses in the ceasefire that is hanging on by a thread in Gaza, too. This is the great part about the Trump administration. So they broker these agreements that Israel doesn't really want. But then it's like, you can do whatever you want if the other side breaks it. And then, of course, Bibi has to say yes. And maybe he also is Trump's lapdog. In this case, I actually think he kind of was, in the sense that he didn't really have a choice. Trump wanted this to get done in order to get a Strait of Hormuz deal locked in. This was what the Iranians were asking for. And this is the other reason why the right-wing Israelis are upset. They're basically saying that, this is Trump's priorities, not Israel's, and Israel has to abide by this. But hey, guess what? America's the superpower. Israel isn't. Suck it up, Bibi. You just had America flying wing to wing with you over the skies of Iran for the last 40 days. You can do him this favor as long as the terms are right for jumping back in if you have to.
Seth.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, nobody wants Seth. We're just all citing Seth.
No. I'm eager for Seth's perspective here. I read his post. It's fantastic. What I'm concerned about here is the American position. Is Trump's doing this now? By all accounts, the blockade is successful or is on its way to being successful. Trump has the remnants of the regime over a barrel. I'm concerned about the message that the U.S. is sending at this moment by giving Iran anything resembling a voice. I mean, it's not explicitly Iran, but we know that Iran wanted a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Why? Why is he doing that? This is the point at which Trump really should be turning the screws to drive home the point that Iran doesn't, as Trump likes to say, have any cards. The U.S. holds all the cards now, and this is what disturbs me. I get why Bibi has to do what he has to do. But yeah.
Okay, so got Schanzer saying that the force deal. Abe is saying, why on earth would he do this when we have the upper hand? Seth, try to give us some context about what the deal itself privileges the Israelis to do, if you even want to even call it a ceasefire. Because
Sure.
it doesn't
this
look like
is
a ceasefire to me, except that right now they're not firing at each other, maybe.
right. So everybody, these are not all mutually exclusive. Like Trump wanted the ceasefire. The Israelis were not champing at the bit for a ceasefire. That's true. But it looks like when you read it, Trump basically said, I want to be able to say I have a ceasefire on all fronts. So you fill in the blanks. Because it looks like a ceasefire filled out, the terms filled out by an Israeli. Because a few there are like three different parts of it that stand out. One is it says the initial period may be so the ceasefire for 10 days. The initial period may be extended by mutual agreement between Lebanon and Israel if progress is demonstrated in the negotiations and as Lebanon effectively demonstrates its ability to assert its sovereignty. So that's one plank of it, which means the fighting has to continue during the ceasefire, right? But it within Lebanon. So let's start there, okay? So what ceasefire? Everybody stop firing, except the Lebanese government at Hezbollah. In order to extend the ceasefire, the Lebanese government has to do things that show some sort of tangible progress, or else Trump won't force the Israelis to agree to it again. Trump is basically saying, Trump loves ceasefires. I'm not really sure why. I tend to think he likes everything being at the same speed at the same time. So if things are calm right now with Iran and there's no bombs dropping, he maybe wants that paralleled. I'm not really sure. But he's basically saying, look, I'm not going to force the Israelis to keep doing this. You have 10 days. So you keep firing. And then it says, Israel shall preserve its right to take all necessary measures in self-defense at any time against planned, imminent, or ongoing attacks. This shall not be impeded by the cessation of hostilities. So now we've got, there's three sides. Everybody stop firing. And now we've got two of the sides firing again, are allowed to fire. This is written as though it were a Hezbollah ceasefire, because it is basically saying the Israelis can go in. Now, they're going to have to be careful.
So in other words, you're saying, just to spell it out, you're saying, A, the ceasefire holds as long as Lebanon does things to disarm Hezbollah. And the ceasefire holds even if Israel the ceasefire, as we understand it legally, will still be in existence even if Israel goes and kicks the crap out of Hezbollah because it discerns an imminent threat, not even as a response to an actual plan. Right, not even in response to an actual event that it then has the right to defend itself against. So this is some ceasefire agreement. I am unaware of any ceasefire agreement in the history of ceasefire agreements that sounds like this.
Except for the last one. Literally, the last one was a ceasefire. A ceasefire. The last time around, what the Israelis did is they said, fine, we will agree to a ceasefire, but what we're going to do is we're going to call in anything that we see out of Hezbollah that we don't like. We're going to call Morgan Ortagus over at the White House. We're going to tell her what happened. Morgan has to pick up the phone and call the Lebanese. If the Lebanese don't do anything to respond to said aggression, then Israel gets to bomb the snot out of Hezbollah. And that happened for 500 plus days.
Right.
Now, so we're back to this. That
well,
is what
so I think one of the differences, though, is that one of the differences is that the reason to structure a ceasefire like this, it seems to me, or the main reason, is because Lebanon's armed forces need help to take any action against Hezbollah. So essentially what Trump is doing is he's saying, you guys go after Hezbollah, Israel will help you, and then you will earn an extension of the ceasefire by working with Israel to knock out Hezbollah. And in that period, it sounds like also what he's saying, Trump is saying, no more from President Aoun, no more, I don't feel like speaking with Bibi today. No more I will, I won't, whatever he's saying. He put language of the diplomatic and the military in there. It's basically saying you need to look like you are our man in Beirut.
Right.
And otherwise the Israelis can do whatever they want. And the last thing, I just want to mention one other really quickly, one other aspect of the deal is that it says Israel and Lebanon request that the United States facilitate further direct negotiations between the two countries with the objective of resolving all remaining issues, including demarcation of the international land boundary. So Trump is saying, I'm not going to tell the Israelis to get off an inch of Lebanese soil. I'm not going to consider it an occupation or an invasion until this is all done and we're satisfied.
Right.
So we're not even there's no border even right now. It's everybody in versus Hezbollah. And that part of it is also something that Israel doesn't usually get, this idea that, like, well, we don't really know where the borders are, or, you know, anything, or Israel has to retreat to a certain line.
To give the world a sense of of how revolutionary a moment this is, and this is Jonathan Schanzer's subject, 2006, Israel spent 32 days at war in Lebanon against Hezbollah, pushing Hezbollah back across the Litani River in an act that was supported by the George W. Bush administration until day 32, at which point Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said, okay, that's enough. You know what? 32 days is fine. 33 days is not fine. We're going to go to the UN, and the UN, we're going to sign a deal, and then, you know what? An international force is going to protect Israel and from Hezbollah's incursions and pacify the area 20 miles north of the Israeli border. Guess what didn't happen?
Just
guess.
Yeah, any of it.
None of it happened, right? So 20 years ago, almost to the day, I mean, not quite to the day, but 20 years ago this year, the United States supported an Israeli war in Lebanon until they got they got bored, or they got annoyed, or something like that. It was going great, it was actually working, and then Condi Rice said, I've had enough, stop. And then, of course, Israel, even then, not being the little buddy brother partner in a war against Iran, had to stop because it can't fight a war like this with no support from the United States. And that's why this deal sheet that we just saw is kind of head-shakingly revolutionary. Maybe it doesn't matter. John, you texted me, John, and you said there is no Lebanon. So I don't even know what they're agreeing to. There is no state of Lebanon.
Yeah.
That's what it says in the deal. That's what it's about.
Fair
the boundary,
enough,
right?
but right. Okay.
So let me just respond in a couple of ways. I mean, first of all, there is no state of Lebanon. I mean, the government is a mess, right? You get the whole sectarian confessional system where you get the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Maronites, and they're all fighting over, like, bald men fighting over a comb or whatever it is. But, like, there's no power to be had in this country, right? I mean, there are no true levers of power. The LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, is a clown car. They cannot accomplish any of the things that a normal military will do, and the institutions themselves are falling apart because the government itself is somewhere around, and I'm just going to do back of the envelope here, about $200 billion in debt because of corruption and mismanagement. And so they have no money, they have no government, they have no military, and they're being asked to do this. Wink and a nod, like, hey, you guys need to go solve your Hezbollah problem, and then if you don't, then the Israelis will. This is a recipe for more war, but what it's doing is, so, like, two things can be true at the same time here. One, there's a deal that's been put in place that's really not a deal because there is no Lebanon and Israel doesn't trust it, America doesn't trust it, and we're very likely to see more attacks against Hezbollah coming soon to a theater near you. By the way, the Israelis have not left southern Lebanon, and they will not leave southern Lebanon.
Which was Seth's point. Seth's point said
they will be deployed there.
Says you only leave when all is done, and then we'll say the border exists. Yeah.
They are still deployed and ready to fight, and they are willing to do it tomorrow if they have to.
Right.
That's one. But the other thing can be true at the same time, too, which is the United States, with pressure from Iran and pressure from Pakistan and possibly pressure from China, everybody's basically saying the same thing. We got to get the Strait open. And if the Iranians are threatening that they're going to drag out this war so long as Israel is firing, well, then Israel has to stop. And the United States has just capitulated to a demand by the Chinese, Iranians, Pakistanis, and Lord knows who else. And both of those things can be true. And by the way, Trump may say, hey, just work with me now for a couple of days. Let's get this deal hammered out. And then I'll let you know when you can go back in and start shellacking Hezbollah again.
Right.
That may be part of what's going on here, too. But I will just say Israel lost agency here for a time, even if the terms of the deal were actually quite good.
Okay, I'm just not sure that's true, but we'll see. Like, this is actually provable. This, you're saying they lost agency. I see a deal that says they have all the agency that they could possibly want, and that this deal doesn't really exist, just as Lebanon doesn't exist, because it depends on the Lebanese government that doesn't exist and the Lebanese armed forces that don't really exist in the form doing things to enforce the ceasefire that they won't be able to do. And in any case, Israel's still allowed to do whatever it thinks it needs to do if it discerns a threat from Hezbollah, let alone has to actually wait until it absorbs a blow to react. But I want to go to the larger picture, because you bring up the larger picture about whether or not Trump is engaged in some kind of a weird gavotte with Iran over the strait that involves Pakistan and China. Okay, you know this way better than I do. It looks to me like the closure of the strait that is really the opening of the strait, that we call the blockade of the strait, that isn't the blockade of the strait, is working. Has worked for the last 48 hours, in the sense that the Iranians are getting nothing out, but other traffic is moving through the strait. So, explain to me, if you can, why Trump wouldn't look at that and say, or I think Abe is actually asking that question also, they're on the ropes. Like we're minutes away from crushing their hopes and dreams and leaving them a tattered husk of a fourth-rate power that can't even close the Strait of Hormuz.
I love the optimism. And it's probably actually not really a bad frame for this at all. I think Trump is trying to get out. And he wants to get out clean, right? And he's concerned about the regime fighting back and deciding that it wants to draw in American troops and American vessels to have to accompany tankers in and out of the Strait of Hormuz because of shoulder-fired missiles and short-range attacks that really are almost undefendable. The regime has that threat that is hanging over Trump. Look, if you ask me, I just had a conversation with H.R. McMaster about this. He thinks it's very doable that the United States could walk away having liberated the strait by force. But he also will cede this is not easy, and it will be the kind of thing where the Democrats in this country will go nuts over this because it's the deepening of the involvement. And isolationist Republicans are also going to go nuts over this. And I think Trump has to ask himself, is this really what I want right now? I think the answer is no. I think he wanted the clean win. He wanted to be able to walk away and say, I won. And basically, if I'm reading this right, and John, this actually tracks back a little bit to the article that has just posted a commentary that I wrote for you guys where, we talk about this idea of victory and how to declare victory. What the Iranians want is they want some term of theirs to be included in all of this as a means to declare their victory. And so they're going to, I think, allow for the Strait of Hormuz to remain open. And that's a loss. And they just got their tuchuses handed to them in the conventional war, so they can't declare victory there. There's only one place where they can show that they were able to impose their will on the other side. And that was getting Israel to stop this war in Lebanon for a time. Maybe not forever, and it doesn't even matter what's written. It is the perception that they were able to impose their will on their mortal enemy, the hated Israelis.
Abe, so this is your fear. But as I listen to Jonathan characterize this fear, it seems like a pretty weak or slender reed for the Iranians, or a fig leaf that literally has a stem and like a branch and no green anywhere else to cover the humiliation, because that they get Israel to stop firing in Lebanon does absolutely nothing to suggest that they have secured any kind of an aim directly against the United States. And there is this detail today that we need to talk about that's very odd, that Trump announced, and it could just be a psyop, but Trump announced that the Iranians agreed to give us all of the nuclear materials. Said it at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We're getting the dust. Now, the Iranians have issued a statement saying, we never said they're getting the dust, but who knows which Iranians are who that are saying what to whom? Abe, go ahead.
I'm reminded of there was a statement that Trump made just before the last Tuesday's announcement of the ceasefire, a day or two before, where he said in very vague, very Trumpian terms, we're dealing with the right people in Iran right now. How do you know this? Because they've given us a great gift. What was that gift? That was never expanded upon. No one went into that. That just sort of floated out there into the ether, and then things moved on. I'm not sure about that gift.
People interpreted the gift. They said the gift was that they were going to let some ships through the strait. But that was never confirmed as the gift, right? That was when people were like, what the hell is this thing? It was like, oh, they said they would let some ships through.
Right.
Which wasn't much of a gift anyway. But but there was some interpretation of it, and then we, maybe he got the orb. Maybe they gave him
exactly. The orb. My big fear of the announcement of the talks in Islamabad was that the Iranians were going to do what they always do, which is they were going to demand all sorts of unreasonable things and say, but, if you show to the U.S., if you give us some sort of give us some sign of goodwill on your part, give us X, we will continue to think about the propositions on the table. And I had come away from Vance's rejection of the Iranian negotiators' position and his statements. I'd come away from it thinking, we've broken that cycle. The U.S. is not falling for that now. And there is a part of me that worries that this ceasefire is that show of good faith by other means. And, as you say, John, I just don't, he doesn't have to do it. I think the whole point now is that he's got the right policy. He's got them on their knees. There is absolutely no reason to give them what is actually a pretty strong, at least a talking point in their favor at a time when their power and influence is at such low ebb. To be able to give the Iranians the idea that they can dictate policy in Lebanon as it applies to Israel and Hezbollah, I think that is such a counterproductive message at a time when it doesn't need to be said for any good reason.
It's just a question, and this is where we're 2-2 here. In other words, we got Abe and we got Greenwald and Schanzer versus Mandel and Podhoretz. You're like, this is counterproductive and it doesn't look good, and it gives it denies Israel agency, it's giving Iran something. And we're saying Lebanon got nothing, Hezbollah has nothing, Israel was dealt all the agreement is a fake agreement because it still hands Israel all the cards that it needs to play, and Iran got nothing, the Lebanon and Hezbollah got nothing, and I still don't know what possible claim the Iranians are going to make, and because in fact, from what I can see, given that we've had the whole day here, not that that's a very long time, not quite the whole day, I don't see the Iranians walking around trumpeting that they brought America to its knees through this ceasefire in Lebanon. Like, I don't know where the statements are. I haven't seen some stupid meme out of the Iranian embassy in Tunisia that shows, Trump's head being blown up by Jesus, which was yesterday's game. So I guess
what a time to be alive, by the way.
It's a joy. It's a joy to have trolling on the one hand. Oh, so anyway, so I think we have established that there is a very interesting set of new circumstances here involving where the war is, because we've, of course, stopped bombing. We're not doing bombing runs. That jibes with Trump and some of the people in the military saying, we don't really have much, we're running out of targets. So it's not like we're leaving a lot of stuff undealt with in the air war. We're kind of done with that. And this is, of course, where you and McMaster, the conversation you had with General McMaster, one of America's foremost military historians and strategists, and a person who's fought counterinsurgencies and fought the Iranians and fought the Iraqis and all that, where you're like, the next stage of war, if there's going to be war, has got to be not just from the air. If you need to deal the knockout blow, in some sense it's going to have to be either on the ground or in the water, or a combination of both, because you've done...
Or I got one thing for you.
Yeah.
Today, Thursday, because I know this is airing Friday, on Thursday, the United States announced Operation Economic Fury. I don't know if you saw this, but it was a new tranche of sanctions.
Please dilate upon it.
It's epic fury with economics, if you didn't catch the cleverness of this. So actually, I do like it. I think it's a good name.
Yeah.
As a former Treasury guy, I'm like, this is amazing, right? But because I never had economic fury when I was at Treasury. They get it now.
Apparently, it's only when Scott Bessent gets mad at people and he punches them in private that we get economic fury.
But anyway, I am jealous of this, and I need to come to terms with that. But what they just did is they sanctioned a whole network of individuals that were involved in moving illicit money around, and it includes, the Turks and the UAE and Iranians, and right. But this is, I think, what is likely the beginning of a new phase while we do this thing that's going on, this ceasefire with opening up the strait and blocking the Iranians. I think we're now going to start going after their illicit networks. We're going to start imposing more sanctions. We're going to be cutting off banks from their international system. We're going to potentially see kinetic strikes on economic targets. My colleague Miad Maliki looked just at the cost to Iran of this siege. And what he actually determined is, just with nothing else, no additional sanctions, no cutting off banks, none of that stuff, the Iranians lose $430+ million per day. And now imagine if this thing goes on for a couple of weeks, the money for this regime is going to start to run out quickly. Their ability to pay their own people to continue to crack down on the protesters, their ability to put food on the table for the IRGC and for the Basij. All of this, I think, this is the next phase in the war. I think that what McMaster was talking about as a possible boots on the ground or boats in the water scenario comes after this. And this is the one thing that I don't love what happened in Lebanon, but I can certainly live with it. I mean, I think all in all, things are going the right way. Having the opportunity to see this get implemented now could bring us closer to the moment that we've all been waiting for. And that's what I'm watching for.
So this is yet another example of the way in which I think this war has been fought either in an innovative way, an entirely new and unprecedented way, or like backwards, which is to say, imposing economic measures and blockades and things like that is usually prefatory to kinetic military action. You do what you can to starve your opponent of his means, his trading routes, his income, so that he's already on the ropes where that's concerned when you start literally shooting the heavy guns. And that's not how this war happened. This war happened with the bombing first, the blockade second, the ceasefire third, and now the economic measures fourth, and then possibly, according to you, with the regime totally on the ropes, dazed, ruined, penniless, and unable to supply its elites with what they need, then you roll into town with them lying bloodied and battered on the streets without much ability to stand up and fight you as your tank. I'm not. That's not a real. This is a metaphorical thing. I'm not saying that we're going to roll into Tehran with tanks. First of all, that's not where Tehran is physically. It's way up in the north. It's in the wrong place in the country for us to be rolling tanks in from elsewhere. But that's what's interesting about what's going on here. That this is a potentially new template for how a war is being fought, or it's just chaos, and that we're just in a sort of, we're just making it up as we go and dealing the cards to ourselves as we will. Again,
the script is flipped. I mean, I think that's for certain. This idea that, that economic siege is the precursor to invasion, that is traditionally what happens, and it is absolutely not what happened here. And so I guess, and this is intriguing, right? The idea that we would launch this economic war, this economic fury against the regime, and after we've already depleted a lot of their assets and hurt them in lots of other physical ways, while we do this, can we see movement toward our ultimate goal, at least as I would describe it, which is either capitulation on their part or a defeat that is undeniable, that leads to the downfall of the regime. And here's the part, I guess, where it's worth noting that this regime is deeply ideological. It sees its fight with the United States and with Israel as something that is, ordained by their creator and by the founder of the revolutionary ideology from Khomeini back in 1979. They believe that this is their fight. And so the question is, do they keep going and do they keep slugging it out? Or does this lead them to a point of exhaustion? We are doing this. I think the upshot of all this, the good stuff that I can point out here is we're dictating the pace and the terms of how this thing's being fought. And that you can say that Donald Trump's done.
We seized it back. I mean, I think it's also fair to say that that was being compromised by the kind of worldwide freakout over Hormuz. That they pulled back some agency or some sense that they were completely on the ropes and had literally no control over what was being done to them. And then they said, no, we're going to do what we can to disrupt international shipping and use that and bombing other third countries, right?
Right. So now what we've done is we've taken the initiative back.
Right.
We're like, you don't get to seize Hormuz. We get to seize Hormuz.
Right.
We're the people that are blockading. You're not blockading. And that's changed things again. And now we're going to be doing the other economic things. Hopefully we'll be seeing more of this. And now the question is, whatever the Iranians do next, I mean, this is, I think, the Donald Trump playbook now. It's you, my enemy, you don't get to decide anything. And again, that's what brings it back to the Lebanon thing that's just so odd. That he's basically saying, you don't dictate any terms except that one over there in Lebanon. And that doesn't strike me as logical. I understand that the Israelis are they're a sure thing, right? It's not like he's going to disrupt the alliance with Israel over this move. I think he knew that he could do this, and maybe this is one act of goodwill. But I will say, getting back to Abe's point, if we're if we're dominating right now and we're winning, why are we making even one concession? It's a fair question to ask. I'm not saying the sky's falling, by the way. And I do think the Israelis can still do all the things that they want in Lebanon. And I think the U.S. has seized the initiative again in the Persian Gulf, at least for now. So I'm not unhappy with anything that I'm seeing writ large, but I have questions.
But since we haven't said that we did this as a goodwill gesture to the Iranians to give them something to come to the table and we can then, have fun with the negotiations, since we don't even have if we have one, it's silent and quiet and secret. And if we have another public one, presumably that will only happen when there is something very specific to discuss, like the ceasefire is about to come to an end. Are we going to continue it? Right? So let's say that happens. It doesn't happen. I don't know. We're still in a weird situation in which Trump may have wanted a ceasefire because he wanted a deliverable for himself.
Yeah.
So, and that deliverable would be he gets to have a Camp David moment. He gets to have a White House lawn moment where he's got the Israeli prime minister and the Lebanese prime minister sitting at a table signing a piece of paper. Now, we may think that that's Narishkeit, but it'll look like. By the way, the other ones, with the exception, the Oslo one was yeah, okay.
I think any ceremony on the White House lawn between Israel and an Arab country this is good stuff. This is what we want, right?
Right.
And I think
Oslo, we don't want Oslo, but yeah,
not Oslo,
and that wasn't a country anyway. Yeah,
we like the agreements that are peace for peace, not land for peace. I think those are the better variety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's what you'd get here with the Lebanese if we get there. And again, I do all the things that I'm picking up out of Lebanon suggest that people are actually pretty hungry. They don't love Israel, but man, are they tired of fighting Israel, and they're tired of Hezbollah dragging the country into wars with Israel. They're ready for this, and I think that it should be pursued. I guess my concern or my question here is, let's say the administration didn't want to do one thing for the Iranians. Mm-hmm. Who then pushed for this? Because it's not like Trump's going to volunteer this. There are a couple of other people at the table right now that have some sway with Trump. Pakistan happens to be one of them. And let me just say, these guys are not lovely interlocutors. They're not honest brokers. They are, they're pretty terrible as far
Vance
as
loves
regime.
Them. Vance loves them. Vance, ooh.
Yeah.
Did Vance say nice things about them?
Yeah, he also got up and left Islamabad in like 5 minutes because they failed to broker what he wanted.
Yeah.
And,
how long would you stay in Islamabad if you didn't have to?
Less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, yes. Anyway, but I'm just saying he was like, thank you to Marshal Gashmegi for his wonderful tea service and the crumpets that were just delicious, and we're now goodbye. You know, and then like a character in a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, he's just like whoosh out and out the door. Right. So
a Vance-shaped hole in the wall.
Exactly. So we have that. I also want to point out, and then we'll probably just close this off, that Donald Trump, of course, then made another statement tonight, because he's a very busy man. So he's also all, he's not a busy man, so all kinds of time. So he just made a very harsh and semi-defamatory statement about Tucker Carlson and Joe Kent, the former director of the Counterterrorism Center. Joe Kent, of course, being one of the quitting his job and then saying that Trump was a tool of the slave of Israel. And basically he said he only met Joe Kent when his wife died, and they were at Dover. They were at the Dover ceremony. I felt sorry for him, but boy, did he get married really fast. He got married too fast, in my opinion, to a new woman. And then I said, give him a job. And now he's a leaker and a traitor. And who's stupider, Tucker Carlson or Joe Kent? So you can tell me that I'm supposed to hate Donald Trump. And I have said many, many negative things about Donald Trump over the past 10 years. But I really do want to say that when he says things like this, my heart grows 3 sizes that day. As I ordinarily a Grinch, do find myself filled with the milk of human kindness and fellow feeling when Trump takes an axe to evil anti-Semitic monsters and pieces of crap. And so I would like to celebrate that. That's tonight, as I say, this, you're hearing this Friday, this was Thursday night, and it was just a moment of just a joy is all I can say. And
I also, there's one other thing that he's done with this, and that is, we talked about, the interlocutors, right? There's Pakistan and whatever, but who's missing here, right? For the past several years, the French have been summarily booted out of West Africa, right? There's everywhere, like dominoes, one by one, and they're gone. Even, at the Ivory Coast even jumped in. I mean, the French, if you're French, this has actually been, you're actually glad for these other conflicts in the world, because it's been 3 years of just getting booted. And now Lebanon, Trump gets Lebanon to say, we don't need you, Macron. We're going to do this. Mr. Trump has it. So this is the other things that France is just kind of they're just standing outside the house with holding up a boombox, they're not a meaningful part of this. And he has managed to sideline Europe in a way that they haven't been able to hit him back. They said, well, after the war, we'll send, our own ships through the Strait of Hormuz or whatever. But in the meantime, it's Trump sends his Secretary of State out there to say that Spain actually doesn't own this part of the land and this part of the land, and Spain's actually illegal occupiers or whatever. I mean, he's deconstructing Europe out loud in a stream of consciousness, but it's working. France is getting kicked around.
And Schanzer, your subject, not mine, but for France to be sidelined in Lebanon,
yeah.
I don't know how quite to describe what it means for France to be. We're not an imperial, but very hard to find an American analogy. Yeah. It would be a little like America being sidelined on the Virgin Islands or something.
Yeah, or like Puerto Rico or something. Yeah,
yeah, like Lebanon was a French vassal state. Yeah. The entire leadership class of Lebanon for hundreds of years spoke French as its first language. It was a French country layered on top of an weird Arab multi-ethnic, multi-religious framework, and that they are now a side player is a pretty, just in terms of the geopolitical chessboard that, if you like Stratego or Risk or diplomacy, that's a pretty startling development. It doesn't really have any valence now in 2026 because I don't know what virtue France could bring to its relationship with Lebanon, but it's still go back 40 years and talk to me in 1983 and tell me that Lebanon wasn't a player in a war, that France wasn't a player in a central war in Lebanon, and I would be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
The entire Lebanese ruling class has been educated in France, speaks French, was trained by the French military, was taught how to do everything by the French, and the French Foreign Legion is there and whatever, and now they're all toast.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. I mean, you do know that Bibi has gone out of his way to elbow the French out of these talks. I mean, he has stated explicitly that the French will not take part in the Israeli discussions with Lebanon, and that is just killing Macron. I mean, this guy has ulcers right now because of Bibi's statements. It's killing him. And yes, the history of France in the region is long, and it is very not distinguished. They've done enormous damage to the region, and I think there's a recognition of that among a lot of these Arab states. So nobody misses them. I actually think that if the French got involved in this, it would make things a lot worse. I think the idea of doing this without Europe and having the Israelis and the Lebanese hammer this out one-on-one with a little bit of supervision from the guy that's got 27 jobs at the White House. I think that is it's a good formulation. No one's pushing them to, I mean, the French have diplomatic interests and commercial interests in the region, and that's what they're going to put first. One of the things I'll just say this about Lebanon that I really like that I'm hearing from Lebanese and from Israelis right now, and from the United States, is that these three countries are actually, their primary focus is about reestablishing the sovereignty of Lebanon. They're really not talking about anything else. I mean, Hezbollah is part of this and the war and whatever, but if you got rid of Hezbollah, then what you would have is a sovereign Lebanon. And I don't think that's what the French want. I don't think it's actually what the Gulfies want, right? What you're looking at right now is an attempt by Israel, and no one thinks about Israel as being this sort of virtuous country that's thinking about this from the perspective of the other, right? But what I think the Israelis have come to understand, and I think that the Trump administration has come to understand too, that if there is sovereignty in Lebanon, there will be peace. And that's what they're going for.
And speaking of peace, I would like everybody to read Jonathan Schanzer's piece. This is P-E-I-E-C-E.
I see what you did there.
P-E-A-C-E in the May issue of Commentary, now available for you at commentary.org, which is titled, What Victory Looks Like When Your Foe Won't Surrender. The U.S. can win without Iran acknowledging it lost. And this is a very original and important argument. You point out that we have not actually seen an unconditional surrender to the United States for more than 80 years by anyone. We don't see unconditional surrenders in war anymore to us or in wars anywhere around the world. So what does it mean to win a war? We have a game. We have a template being made before our eyes where we don't need Iran to say that we won. We just need to win. And then the victory will be in the Iranian regime's inability to work its will, and then probably, as you say, to ultimately to collapse. But if it loses its agency in the world, it loses. And that's how this is going to go. The issue itself, full of glories and wonders. We'll talk about them next week. Have a wonderful weekend. For our friend Jonathan Schanzer, our very important, very knowledgeable person here over these weeks and months to help us understand this, and I hope we'll continue to do so. And for Abe and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.